Yeah, I didn't like that last video too much myself either. It's kind of an amalgamation of 2 months of not wanting to make a video, if that can't really be. My knee hurts too much for a high energy review, so let's do something nice and simple. Let's take a look at something I like. How about? Luckily, we have a companion piece to Texas Rangers in the form of Deadman. This is quite a two-pack right here. It's combining one of the worst westerns I've ever seen with one of the best westerns I've ever seen.
These are like the two most polar approaches to telling a western you could have. They have like one thing in common, and you are not gonna guess what. Go ahead, guess.
Dead Man is made by Jim Jarmusch and is probably my favorite of his movies. You can tell it's a very different western because at first it just seems like a fish out of water story, but in terms of that kind of story, it's doing things that are very different from other westerns. It wants to capture the real lifestyle of that world, and that's not unheard of for a western to be attempting to capture realism. But Jim Jarmusch has a fascination with history. One of the first things our main character is doing is reading what looks like a real life farmer's almanac from the year that it takes place in. Yeah, there is the clear indication from the very start that this is a purgatory story for our main character walking through the West.
I don't know how you could have possibly missed him going into this deep dark tunnel, but I mean, what did you think all that smoke was for? Making the train go choo choo? Go to hell.
He's going far her out for a job in a factory, which is the only real established business in the town that he arrives in, which is the town of Machine, I think. Sort of lying in between where the Western Front ends and the unclaimed territory begins. The town's called Machine. The symbolism is pretty heavy-handed. The symbolism in Dead Man is coming from Jim Jarmusch, and Jim Jarmusch is not known for being subtle. While I lack appreciation for the impossibility of the symbolism on display in the magical world of Dead Man, and it does have that removal from reality that makes it slightly more acceptable. Well, not to mention, the construction of its world is in direct contrast as to a lot of other westerns like Once Upon a Time in the West or Sisters Brothers, which are focusing on how the West advanced away from the cowboy age into technological society. Dead Man instead is looking at the world that's bygone.
What? Just because I have two movies in a row that are westerns, you think I want to be a cowboy? I'm insulted. Y'all would even have that implication.
Jim's looking to create a fairy tale of the dying frontier. It feels more like a Roald Dahl, Willy Wonka world. There are a lot of characters that are made to fit only into the Western, and he's doing things and showing them bond in ways that are particular to the Western itself, I'd say, but not all of them. Dead Man returns an advancing age to its grassroots and traverses the woods and the worlds of North America like you can't really see anymore, as best as he could back then. And it takes us from the Nevada deserts, as I'm assuming, all the way to the West Coast. And my second viewing caught wind of the natural progression of the landscapes, and it's honestly really beautiful to see all these locations. Even our small part villain is caught in the beauty of Cali's redwood forest that he's never seen before, because he's only ever been living in the grungy world of the decimated landscapes of human expansion. In terms of characters, our villains are more richly developed than our Johnny Depp protagonist. Johnny Depp as the fish out of water is overshadowed pretty frequently, functioning more so as a window to our world and the characters within it. He seems less interesting than the shots from his perspective, which will take us walking through some of the locations and see some of the sights. But clearly he's harmless, and that's a big part of his character, is taking this harmless character and showing him how to fight into the natural world as a cowboy. And he certainly has an investment in developing the indigenous characters that often get overlooked in these westerns as villains or dehumanized. I watched this movie Bone Tomahawk recently, and it's not as though it's
What? Sure!
He's not the most indigenous of actors. Native Americans do get to fill out some of the smaller roles. So does Iggy Pop.
What's a scourge?
It's like when something real bad happens, like when everybody gets killed and you can't do anything about it.
That's pretty Jim Jarmusch. So is his getting Neil Young to do the soundtrack, which I was kind of so on for only, achieving creating the worlds.
Sorry to call you out on your shit, Janice, but you called it thin and distractingly so.
Then I decided it created a subtle nuance within the world. In Jim's style of human-focused performance, we have the first example of a romance between Native Americans in film, and it's one all its own, certainly. Not to mention, it gives us a lover's spat in a foreign language. Oh, it's one of those things that's sort of attempting to capture the humanizing aspects of people who might not have otherwise experienced it. And it's one of my favorite scenes for that reason. But also the second time we've had sex in this movie. You don't have to see it, at least. Jim has a lot of firsts, like the first actual prostitution to happen in a movie. It's not the last.
Well, that's terrible.
It's horrible.
Terrible is what it is.
It's a very grungy world. I guess that's because it came out of the 90s. And this is one of them that I think holds up a lot better than propaganda does. You've gotten your sexually explicit warning. I think this movie is probably rated R. How do I feel about prostitution? It sounds a lot easier than just having sex. I've been inside an ass, and exercise is far more physically relieving. So if someone were to pay me for that, that'd make more sense to me. But I can also see why I don't want that in front of me. And it's not incredibly violent, but its violence is also incredibly realistic. It steals the idea of the one shot, one kill in the Western. It really accentuates its violence as being naturalistic. And that's something that's equally interesting for a Western, to see somebody fumbling with their gun because there's actual tension. Who's gonna be ready to shoot first? I'd give it a solid recommendation with slight warnings, things in mind. And hopefully I won't have to do another movie review before I can get to do another video